Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I'd like to say a big thank you to Magpie for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard army. This is the 1st Regiment of the Swamp Foxes, and I just have to say I really like the green on these vehicles. It just feels so lush. I just want to get in there and just roll around in that green. It just feels great. So thank you so much for sending this picture. And I also really like the brown and green colour scheme on the infantry as well. Overall, I think it's a really cool colour scheme, a little bit unique, and that's great. So thank you for sending these pictures in, Magpie. If anyone else has got any cool pictures you want to use in my videos, then please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. And don't worry if you like. So today, guys, I want to talk about the all-important concept of balance. And is Warhammer 40k balanced right now? And is it a good time to get into the competitive scene? Well, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that I personally don't think that Warhammer 40k will ever be truly balanced. We can always... I personally think that achieving 100% perfect balance is almost impossible in any situation. I mean, take a look at StarCraft, for example, the video game. That has been around for a long time. It's had 3 factions, and they have never managed to get it perfectly balanced, despite the fact it's a competitive esport. And then look over at Warhammer 40k, which, when you take into account all the different chapters and everything, has over 30 different factions in it. You're never going to get it perfectly balanced, but you can get it to a state of play where things are mostly balanced, or at least every faction has a fighting chance to do something every game. So if we take that as our benchmark for what the level of balance we want to achieve is within 40k, can we answer the question of, is 40k balanced right now? And I would say that it's not perfectly balanced, but it is the best it has been in a long time. For the majority of the end of 8th edition and beginning of 9th edition, balance in 40k was, quite frankly, a bit of a joke. I mean, you had factions running around with 70% plus win rates across multiple tournaments over many weekends. It was just, they were just stomping people from the beginning of 9th edition, where you had Dark Eldar and then you take a look at the other end of the spectrum. We had armies like Guard who were turning up and getting 20% win rates across the board. It was just really, really difficult. And you had factions like Genestealer where people were just not turning up with them. There were week after week where no one would go to an ITC tournament with Genestealer. That's just how bad. But now let's take a look where we are right now with Nephilim and the latest balance patches. Well, things are looking a lot healthier. And I just want to say straight away, right now, I don't think there has been a better time to get into competitive Warhammer 40k since pre-Vigilus 8th edition, many, many years ago. We've gone through about 3 years of bad balance, and we're at this point again now where we're actually at a place where most people can turn up with their army, and they should be able to get a win under their belt. On a 1-day tournament, on a 2-day tournament, most people should be able to go and be like, you know what, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to worry about too much, I'll be able to get 1, maybe 2 wins under my belt, I'm not going to get whitewashed. And maybe some factions are even going to find themselves going from sort of scraping by 2 wins to getting into that sort of more than 50% win rate, and so going to start seeing people going 3-2 rather than 2-3. We're in a really nice place for balance right now, and I have to say I really like Nephilim. As much as I disliked Nachmund, I think that Nephilim has done a fantastic job of balancing the game out. We've been playing it as a community now for several months, and the general results have just been everyone is doing better. Whether that be better in terms of they're not oppressively smashing the fuck out of everyone anymore, or better as if they're not just the punching bag anymore, they're starting to get a few wins under the belts. Everyone is just doing a little bit better. Now, it's not perfect. It's not perfect, okay? But if we take a look at some of these win rates, we've only got like a couple of factions that are really sort of over that 60% win rate right now. We've got Harlequins, which are just smashing it, which are doing quite well, but they're not unbeatable. They're sort of hovering around the 60% win rate. Sometimes they do a little better, sometimes they do a little bit worse, but they're at the top end of it. You've got Tyranids as well, who are doing very well, despite the fact they've not great secondaries. They are doing very well just because they're very well pointed and they've got great damage output. But again, we're seeing Tyranids as a whole across the community balancing out at around a 60-65% win rate. Not great, but we're not seeing the days of 70 to 80% win rates like we were before. Likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, traditionally poor performing armies like Imperial Guard have gone from a 20% win rate up to about 40 to 45% win rate. That's a really, really big improvement. Likewise, we're seeing the traditional strong factions, those that always seem to dominate metas despite the addition, being reined in a little bit and being a lot more manageable. So for example, Tau and Elder have always been considered really strong factions. Of course, they always have the ups and downs, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there'll be many Tau players going, oh, we've been really struggling until the last Kirks. Yeah, I get it, guys, I get it. I mean, no sympathy because you're Tau players, right? But at the end of the day, I do understand that some factions have waxed and waned, but traditionally, Tau have always had a really dominant presence in the competitive scene, so have Elder, and both these factions are now hovering between a 40 and 50% win rate, which makes them a lot more manageable and actually means that they are fun to play against. You don't just turn up against a Tau army and just expect to just set your models up and pick them all up again. You actually expect to get a bit of a game. And likewise with the Elder, they're very tricky to play against. A good player will outmaneuver you. That's just sort of the way it goes. But if you're able to pin them down and bring your firepower to bear or get the drop on them, you are able to beat them. Whereas previously, like, it didn't matter what you did, Eldar traditionally have always just been broken and unbeatable. And so what I'm really enjoying right now about playing Warhammer 40k, about playing competitively, is that you have this feeling of I can go into any game with a well-built list, with a decent game plan, and I should be able to come out the other side with either a win under my belt or at the very least a close loss. But what I think's really good about a lot of games right now, and it's not the case for everything, there are still going to be those games where you get smashed on the table. This is 40k at the end of the day. Something's always going to be broken. But right now, it feels like the vast majority of games that I can go into, be they friendly games or be they competitive games, I can go in and I feel like I'm having a game. Even if I lose, I feel like I've had a game. Because that's one of the biggest issues you can have with competitive play, where you just set your models up and you're like, I am about to waste 2.5 hours of my life. I'm about to waste 3 hours of my life because I'm just going to sit here and just get smashed, and there's basically no point in even rolling the dice. This is just a foregone conclusion. And that's really one of the problems you can find when 40k is unbalanced. But right now, I can go into any game and I can look at it and go, okay, I'm on the back foot here. I'm playing Necrons. The guy's clearly built for secondaries. He's going to be doing really well. I'm not sure I'll be able to win the game, but it's a dice game. Maybe if he's a bit unlucky, I might be able to squeak a win. At the very least, I should be able to feel like I'm actually having a game. I should be able to actually roll the dice, have fun. Even if I know that the end result is kind of going to be a foregone conclusion, it's his game to lose rather than my game to win kind of thing. That's okay because we get to the end of the game and, oh look, my Imperial Guard tank corps has smashed apart loads of Necrons. I've had loads of fun killing them. They've been getting back up, I've been killing them again. How many times do I teach you this lesson, old man? All that kind of good vibes. And I've had a good game because I feel like I've killed lots of stuff, I've rolled lots of dice, and I've actually had my opponent on the back foot. And my Necron opponent's had a good game because he's won the game on his points and everything. And so we both walk away from that table with a feeling like we've actually achieved something. We don't just feel like we've wasted our time. And that's how I feel like what it's like playing Guard right now. A lot of time, you tend to struggle into those armies that have got really overtuned secondaries, but you still feel like you had a game because you're killing lots of stuff. And this kind of leads me on to my other point I want to make about Warhammer 40k, which is that I think that from a balance perspective, there are actually 2 victories up for grabs in every single game. And when you've got 40k balanced well, both of those sources of victory are actually equally prevalent. Okay, now what am I talking about? Morning Glory, there's only one person that wins each game. Someone gets the most points and they win the game and that's it. It's like, well, yeah, that's what I would call the game victory. And that's a victory that a lot of people and many of us strive for. We want to actually win the game, get the most points, do well at the tournament, all that kind of good stuff. But there is a second kind of victory which I think is really important to consider, and it can be very easily overlooked, which is the moral victory. Which is, have you lost the game but walked away feeling like you did a good job? Like, that was a game. Like, you had fun. Okay? Because that is, in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of Warhammer 40k balance, which is the moral victory equally as available as the game victory? And this is what I find with my Guard. This is why I've been having so much fun with my Guard recently, which is because the Imperial Guard right now are a really damage output faction. We can't really take objectives that well. We often get cleared off pretty quickly, but we have got a lot of damage output. We bring her the Daka, all right? And so what I tend to find is, when I'm playing these games of 40k, is I'll often, 50% of the time, I'll get that game victory, and that's great, it's not a problem. And then 50% of the time, what I tend to notice is, like, let's say I'm playing Necrons, or I'm playing Sisters, or I'm playing Harlequins, those factions that really can just do their secondaries without interacting with us. And I tend to find that I might not win the game, but I literally smash apart like 60, 70, 80, sometimes even 90% of their army, and I've barely lost anything. And so for me, I get to enjoy the moral victory, because I'm like, yeah, you might have won the points, but I've absolutely battered your army to death, and that makes me feel good. Because, both of us have walked away with something from that game. You've walked away with the game victory, and that makes you feel good. And I've walked away with the moral victory. You might even say it's the consolation prize, whatever you want to call it, But I've walked away with a slight feeling of accomplishment, because I can go, yeah, I lost that on secondaries. We know not all secondaries are created equally, but look at what my list was able to achieve. It was able to actually, for the first time in many editions, go into a Harlequins list and go, not only am I going to, batter the crap out of you, but I'm going to actually make you have to work for that victory. Unlike in previous editions where Harlequins would turn up, they would just absolutely smash you. And not only on points, but on kills, and there was no more victory up for grabs. And I just want to make that quite a clear distinction, because I think it's really important to have the moral victory in the picture when you're talking about Warhammer 40k balance. Now, whilst Warhammer 40k might be in a good spot right now, where competitive scene actually feels like it's fun to play in again, I would say that we can still strive to improve it a bit more. There are a couple of things that I think are overtuned and need to be reined in. The first one, I think, is that the Tyranids need to be reined in, because their damage output and their warrior spam is just a little bit powerful. I don't want to kick their legs out from underneath them, and it's kind of crazy because I've always enjoyed seeing Tyranid warriors on the table, but they clearly are a little bit overtuned at the moment. So if Tyranids, in terms of their relative power, or maybe their points, could be adjusted, I think that would be really, really good at reining them in slightly. I don't think they need a massive nerf. I'd rather see lots of small incremental nerfs rather than one big one that, just kicks the faction down into the dirt. But I would like to see the Tyranid power reined in slightly. Likewise, I think some of the Harlequin stuff is a bit strong as well. I have played into Harlequins multiple times, and unless you are able to just wipe them off the table by turn 2 or turn 3, it seems that they're able to just dance around and score a million points, and it's very difficult for you to interact with them. So I think that Harlequins need reining in a little bit as well. Again, not too much. Both of these faction tiers Harlequins have received a small round of nerfs, but I think they could do with another small round of nerfs, let it play out for a month, and then see if they need anything else. Speaking of secondaries and people being able to score points and not being able to interact with them, I really think that the Necron secondaries are vastly overtuned. Right now, Necron secondaries are basically like Guard secondaries, but just better in every single way. I would quite frankly take the Guard secondaries, give them different names, and give them to the Necrons, and I think that would actually give them a nice sense of balance. Necron datasheets are a little weak right now, I'm not going to lie, but their secondaries are way overcompensating for it. Considering the fact that you've had multiple tournament winners go to tournaments with Necrons and score 99 to 100 points every single game, despite the fact that they've lost most of their army, is too telling. You shouldn't be able to lose 95% of your army and still be able to come out with 95 plus points. It needs to be reined in a little bit. So for me, I think the Necron secondaries could do with a slight tweak. Same goes for the Sisters ones as well. Now, Sisters aren't dominating the meta too much at the moment, but they are very strong and they are very much on the rise. So for me, I'd just like to nip that in the bud before it got too out of hand. And I would say Necrons and Sisters could do a little bit of tweak to their secondaries. Maybe rather than maxing them out at 15 every single one, it could be a good idea to have some of them max out at 12 points instead, or be unable to be scored in the first turn. Something like that. I think the Guard secondaries are really, really well balanced, and I would definitely look at those as a good example for the Sisters and Necrons to copy and emulate. Now that covers the people that I think need toning down a little bit. In terms of people that need boosting up, I definitely think Adeptus Mechanicus need a nice little buff. Considering where they were at the beginning of the edition, the game has clearly moved on from when their codex was designed and written, and they just need a little bit of a general tweak overall. They have some good data sheets, although they also have some stinkers, but which faction doesn't have a few stinky data sheets? And also I would say that really for them, I think they could just do with a slight overhaul to their secondaries. I think if you gave Adeptus Mechanicus players some decent secondaries to pick from, they would take that and run with it, and probably you'd see their win rate improve and they'd get into that 40% plus win rate fairly consistently. So that's what I think Adeptus Mechanicus could do with. Now the Guard win rate is pretty good at the moment, I'm not going to lie, but the problem I feel with the Guard, and of course this is a Guard focused channel, so this is where my focus is going to be, I think that our secondaries are okay. Some of them are a little difficult to achieve, but that's alright. I feel like Guard got pretty balanced secondaries, and I don't really want to mess with that too much. I think what Guard need right now is an improvement to their data sheets. And obviously we've got a new codex coming out, which could very much do that. But right now, I feel like Guard just have one fundamental flaw. It's a big flaw though, which is they really struggle to hold on to objectives. You can flood them with infantry, but then you don't have the firepower. You can blow people off the table, but then you don't have the infantry to hold the objectives. You don't really have a really tough, durable unit that is also cheap to take at those objectives. You might point to Bullgrin, but Bullgrin are not that durable for their price point. They're actually quite expensive. You compare Bullgrin to like a Terminator, Terminator comes out every single time. So for me, I think that what Guard need right now to just stabilize them a little bit and just keep them in a nice 50% win rate and just to make sure that they are almost a perfectly balanced faction. I think they could do with some slight point decreases, just a little bit, so that they can get the infantry and the tanks they need. And I'd also like to see something done with Bullgrin or Ogryn to make them just a little bit more durable and make them fulfill that role of taking and holding ground as midfield objective takers and holders. Now, there is a big question here, which is about Space Marines. I know a lot of people are going to be saying, but Morning Glory Space Marines don't seem to be doing very well. What would you do with them? Space Marine question is a really tricky one because I've always stated that I think the Space Marine win rate is artificially depressed because of the fact that they are the gateway faction. You have a lot of newer players who pick up Space Marines and they'll go to tournaments relatively quickly because their armies are quite easy to put together, paint and just start playing with them. And so I tend to find that you'd have a lot of new players that are using Space Marines, which keeps that win rate down. Because of that, I wouldn't want to see any drastic measures taken with Space Marines just yet. Armor Content is such a strong buff. As someone who plays into it all the time, Marines are durable enough. They really are durable enough. Now, there is one other faction that I think could do with a little boost, and that is actually Space Marines. Space Marines are a bit of a strange one because Arm Content is such a strong buff. Honestly, since we've had it on the Guard tanks, I can't imagine not having it. And so I'm a bit concerned that Space Marine win rates seem to still be kind of low outside of like Blood Angels. So what I would do with Space Marines is I think the problem that you've got with them is that they are the gateway faction. All right, and that means that a lot of newer players are going to pick them up, and because Space Marines are quite a small army to put together and start playing with, and they're pretty simple to paint, I feel like their win rate might be artificially depressed somewhat because you've got a lot of newer players going to tournaments and getting smashed. So what I would potentially say with the Codex Space Marines is that they do need a little something though. I wouldn't deny that they need a little something, and I would maybe consider, as much as I don't really like this, if GW doesn't want to decrease the points of the Marines, I'd maybe consider going down the free upgrade route, like they've done with Death Guard and like they've done with Imperial Guard and other factions as well. I think if Space Marines could get their hands on a few free upgrades throughout their squads, nothing too ridiculous, you might start seeing them get a little bit of a damage output, but not having to pay any more points for it. So that's what I would probably do with Marines. Try that out and see if it works for them. And historically, we have seen Games Workshop open to doing this with Space Marines. I mean, we had the Gladius attachment back in 7th edition, which allowed them to get free transports. Now, that was a very, very strong formation, and I wouldn't suggest that GW bring the Gladius back. I mean, that would just be absolutely bonkers. But I do think that they could do with a little bit of a buff, and maybe going down the free war gear route would help them get an extra bit of damage output and give them that boost that they might need. And like I said, I wouldn't give them anything totally radical. Maybe Space Marine 2.0 will fix them, I'm not sure. But I do think they need a little bit of a buff, and maybe trying out the free war gear route for some of their units would help them. But that's all we've got time for today. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think 40k is in a good place right now, a bad place, and what would you do to improve it? Put it down in the comment section. Now, if you've enjoyed today's video, please consider giving it a like, and if you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to go the extra mile, then please think about becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It's thanks to my channel members and my patrons that I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time now and bring you loads and loads of extra content. And I just want to take a moment to do a shout out to the latest channel members. So a big thank you to Benjamin Schwartz, The Warp Forge, Ramon Graff, Commissar Doge, Biltong Boob, Paddy Cover, Stefan W, John Curro, Chris B, Gunnar NWP and Apathetic 11B for becoming channel members. Thank you guys for doing your part. And I also want to say a big thank you to the latest channel patrons as well. So a big 07 for Alex Hines, Cadia4, Dominic Griffin, Frost Den, James Carroll and Zed Sylvia 51. Thank you guys for your ongoing support on Patreon. It really is appreciated. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have truly and utterly gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting me. So a massive, massive thank you to Navy Veteran, Philip French, Ross Miller, Tekwal, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nicholas Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and of course, August Varney. Thank you guys for your very generous support. It really honestly, it's life-changing, guys, so thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.